Good afternoon everyone, Delma here, and I'm going to talk about Jesus' death on the cross. First I'd like to read from the Gospel of John, chapter 19. Finally, Pilate handed him over to be crucified. So the soldiers took charge of Jesus. Carrying his own cross, he went out to the place of the skull, which in Aramaic is called Golgotha. There they crucified him, and with him there was 2 others, one on each side, and Jesus in the middle. Pilate had a notice prepared and fastened to the cross. It read, "Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews." Many of the Jews read the sign, for the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and the sign was written in Aramaic, Latin, and Greek. The chief priests of the Jews protested to Pilate, "Do not write the King of the Jews, but that this man claimed to be King of the Jews." Pilate answered, "What I have written, I have written." When the soldiers crucified Jesus, they took his clothes, divided them into 4 shares, one for each of them, with the undergarment remaining. This garment was seamless, woven in one piece from top to bottom. "Let's not tear it," they said to one another. "Let's decide by lot who will get it." This happened that the scripture might be fulfilled that said, "They divided my clothes among them and cast lots for my garment." So this is what the soldiers did. Near to the cross of Jesus stood his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw her mother there, and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to her, "Woman, here is your son," and to the disciple, "Here is your mother." And from that time on, this disciple took her into his home. Later, knowing that everything had now been finished, so the scripture would be fulfilled, Jesus said, "I am thirsty." A jar of wine vinegar was there, so they soaked a sponge in it and put the sponge on a stalk of the hyssop plant and lifted it to Jesus' lips. When he had received the drink, Jesus said, "It is finished." With that he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. Now it was the day of preparation, and the next day was to be a special Sabbath. Because the Jewish leaders did not want bodies left on crosses during the Sabbath, they asked Pilate to have legs broken and the bodies taken down. The soldiers therefore came and broke the legs of the first man who was crucified with Jesus, and then those of the other. But when they came to Jesus and found that he was already dead, they didn't break his legs. Instead, one of the soldiers pierced Jesus' side with a spear, bringing a sudden flow of blood and water. The man who saw it has given testimony, and his testimony is true. He knows that he tells the truth, and he testifies so that you may believe. These things happened so the scripture again would be fulfilled. Not one of his bones will be broken. And as another scripture says, they will look on the one they have pierced. I've read this scripture many times over the years, but it still causes me to have pause when I think of the following. Firstly, even in his agony on the cross, he saw his mother. He cared about her and sought to make sure she was looked after physically and emotionally after his death. Jesus had concern for his mother, and I know God has concern for me and to any who are listening today. He wants to look after us just like Jesus looked after his mother. Secondly, there's so many details regarding the crucifixion that were in earlier scriptures, and Jesus knew what they said. He knew what he was going to be aware, what he was going to be asked to do. He knew what he would endure, and yet he still went through it. He still bowed to God's will, not his own. And then finally, he gave up his spirit. It says he wasn't taken from him. Yes, he was arrested and crucified, but his death was in his control, not merely a result of circumstances. On the cross, he was still God. That as a Christian gives me hope that in whatever circumstances I find myself, God can bring me through. So as we approach another Easter, on Good Friday I remember his sacrifice, and on Easter Sunday I rejoice at his rising.